I was already late, but my hands wouldn't stop trembling as I clasped the thin gold bracelet around my wrist, the one Grandma gave me years ago, before everything fell apart. The city lights shimmered against the black sheen of my car as I sat parked outside the Fairmont Hotel, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lipstick was perfect. My composure, not so much. It had been almost 3 years since I'd seen my parents. 3 years since I stopped trying to earn a seat at their table, literal or otherwise. But when Mom called last week, her voice sugar-sweet and careful, I could almost pretend she missed me. "Your father wants the whole family together again, sweetheart. We're having dinner at the Fairmont." Formal, of course. I told myself I'd go just to prove I was over it, that the old wounds didn't ache anymore. But as I walked through those revolving doors, my heels clicking against marble, perfume mingling with the scent of truffle butter and champagne, I felt it all resurface. Mom's eyes swept over me with polite surprise, like I'd shown up uninvited. Dad gave a curt nod before turning to greet a business associate. And then, the sting, sharp, humiliating, almost absurd. "Emily, dear," Mom said lightly, motioning toward a smaller table off to the side. "You don't mind sitting with the kids, do you? We ran out of space at the main one." I smiled, though my throat tightened. Of course they did. I wasn't always this composed. Once upon a time, I used to flinch at every sigh from my father, every disappointed glance from my mother. Back then, I was just a girl trying too hard to fit inside a mold they designed long before I was born. At 22, I told them I wanted to be a designer, not just the fashion hobbyist they called me, but a real one. I'd saved up for a summer course in New York, even got accepted. When I announced it over dinner, Mom looked horrified, as if I'd confessed to joining a circus. "Emily," she said, slicing her steak with surgical precision, "people don't make a living drawing dresses. You need stability, not silly dreams." Dad didn't even look up from his phone. "If you want to waste your time, fine. But don't expect us to fund it." Their laughter afterwards still echoes in my memory. Not cruel, exactly, just careless. Like I was a joke. That night, I locked myself in my room, trying not to cry loud enough for them to hear. My hands shook as I packed a small suitcase. That's when Grandma knocked softly. Her eyes, kind but sad, searched mine before she pressed something into my palm. A delicate gold bracelet etched with the words, "Remember who you are." "She means well, your mother," Grandma whispered. "But she's forgotten what it feels like to fight for something." Those words stuck with me. The next morning, I left before sunrise. One duffel bag, $100, and a heart bruised but stubborn. I took the bus to New York, watching the world blur by through foggy windows, telling myself this was freedom. It didn't feel like it then. It felt terrifying. But for the first time, the fear was mine. When I stepped off that bus, I promised myself one thing. I would never beg for a seat at anyone's table again. I'd build my own piece by piece, even if it took years. And it did. New York didn't welcome me with open arms. It greeted me with leaky ceilings, late rent notices, and the kind of loneliness that clings to your bones. I worked double shifts at a cafe in Soho, mornings serving lattes to women in heels and evening shifts wiping down tables after closing. In between, I sketched. On napkins, receipts, even the backs of order slips when the manager wasn't looking. I remember my first real break. A woman named Claudia Reeves, one of our regulars, noticed me sketching on my lunch break. She was in her 50s, wore confidence like perfume, and had a kind smile that felt disarming. "Those are good," she said, tilting her head toward my messy drawings. "You have an eye for form. Ever thought about working in design professionally?" I laughed. That's the dream. Claudia turned out to be a creative director for a boutique fashion house in Midtown. A week later, she offered me an internship. Unpaid, of course, which meant sleepless nights juggling work and design projects, but I didn't care. For the first time, someone believed in me. The days blurred into months. Endless cups of coffee, sewing needles pricking my fingers, and subway rides that smelled like exhaustion and ambition. There were nights I came home too tired to cry, but I still hung Grandma's bracelet on my lamp. It reminded me that I was building something. My first collection was small, just 5 dresses I made in a cramped apartment kitchen. I submitted it to a small independent fashion showcase. It sold out in one night. That moment didn't feel like triumph. It felt like oxygen after years of holding my breath. But I didn't post about it. I didn't call my parents. I told myself they didn't need to know, that peace came from silence, not validation. Over the next few years, I climbed higher. Claudia became my mentor, teaching me not just design but dignity, how to hold my ground in rooms full of men who thought I was decoration. I launched my own label, Heart Studio, a nod to both my name and my grandmother's maiden one. The label took off faster than I could process. Celebrities wore my pieces, magazines called, and investors lined up. But still, when family called on the rare occasions they did, I kept it light. "I'm doing fine," I'd say, smiling into the phone. They thought I worked as an assistant somewhere in the city. I let them. Some truths are too heavy to hand to people who once dropped you without looking back. So I stayed quiet. I built my life in peace, surrounded by people who saw me, really saw me, for what I had become. Until that dinner invitation came, gilded in gold script, carrying the same scent of superiority it always had. And for reasons I still can't explain, I said yes. The ballroom shimmered with gold light, chandeliers spilling warmth over polished marble and laughter that sounded rehearsed. My parents always had a talent for appearances. Even love, in their world, came with fine china and folded napkins. I stood near the edge of the room, pretending to check my phone while the waiter poured sparkling water into crystal glasses. Around me, everyone looked expensive, diamonds that caught the light, suits that whispered old money. I recognized faces from my childhood, family friends, former neighbors, people who'd once pitied me for wasting potential. And there it was again, that sharp, polite tone from my mother. "Emily, sweetheart," she said, pointing toward the smaller table near the back. "We thought you'd be more comfortable with the younger cousins. They've missed you." The kids' table. Of course. A polite humiliation wrapped in a smile. I almost laughed. If only they knew. I sat down, brushing the silk of my navy dress over crossed legs, pretending not to care. My cousins, mostly in college, chattered about internships and vacations. They didn't know my name was stitched into garments hanging in luxury stores across the country. They didn't know the delicate clutch I held was from my own collection. I let them talk, listening, detached, until I heard my mother's voice carry across the room. "Poor Emily," she was saying to her friend, her tone falsely sympathetic. "She's still finding her way, bless her heart." I told her she's always welcome back home if things get too difficult. The words sliced cleaner than any insult could. I was about to leave when a familiar voice interrupted. "Excuse me, are you Emily Hart?" Every head turned. A woman stood there, tall, elegant, a fashion editor from Mel. She smiled warmly. "We met at the Milan show last month. Your designs were breathtaking. Everyone's talking about your brand." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother blinked, her wine glass halfway to her lips. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "Her brand?" The editor nodded, oblivious to the tension. Heart Studio. "She's redefining sustainable couture. It's been all over the industry news. You must be so proud." You could have heard a pin drop. I felt the room's attention tilt toward me. Confusion, disbelief, curiosity flickering in every pair of eyes. My father's expression was the hardest to read. He wasn't angry, just stunned. Like he'd suddenly realized the daughter he dismissed had rewritten the family legacy without permission. I smiled politely, rising from the table. "Thank you," I told the editor. "That's kind of you to say." Then, turning to my parents, I added softly, "I didn't want to make a scene, but since everyone seems curious, yes, I own Heart Studio." Gasps rippled through the table. Someone murmured, "That's her?" Mom's face shifted, confusion giving way to pride she hadn't earned. "Well, we always knew she'd do something creative," she said quickly, her voice trembling just enough to betray her discomfort. Dad cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "You've done well for yourself." I looked at them both, These people who once taught me that dreams were impractical, that I was too emotional, too soft, too much. Yeah, I said, my voice calm, even. I did. Around us, the conversation restarted in low murmurs, but the air had changed. They saw me differently now, not as the girl who left, but as the woman who rose. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one trying to prove anything. Dinner carried on, but the atmosphere had shifted entirely. Every time someone glanced my way, it wasn't pity anymore. It was fascination, curiosity, maybe even respect. I could feel my mother's eyes darting toward me, her fingers nervously folding her napkin over and over again. When dessert arrived, she finally spoke. "Emily, darling," she said, voice sugar-coated but shaky. "Why didn't you tell us about all this? We would have celebrated you, supported you." I smiled, not unkindly. "You mean the way you supported me when I wanted to go to design school?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Dad cleared his throat, his gaze heavy. "You know how parents worry," he began, the same tone he used whenever he wanted to smooth over the past. "We only wanted what was best for you." "What you thought was best," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." He looked down, silent. Around us, the chatter had thinned. Even the waiters were pretending not to listen. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "You both taught me something important," I said. "That I can survive being underestimated. That sometimes being pushed out of the room is the best thing that can happen to you because it forces you to build your own." Mom's eyes filled, guilt and pride mixing like oil and water. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "I know," I said softly. "But you did. And you never apologized. You just acted like it was normal, like I was the problem." Silence stretched between us. Finally, my younger cousin, the one sitting beside me, spoke up. "Emily," she said quietly, "I want to be like you one day." That broke something open inside me, a small, bright crack of tenderness. I smiled at her. "Then promise me something," I said. "Don't let anyone decide what you're capable of. Not even family." I turned back to my parents. "If you really want to celebrate me," I continued, "then start by changing how you see people, especially the ones you think are beneath you. Maybe start by treating your own daughter like an adult next time." Dad exhaled slowly, as if the air itself had weight. "You're right," he said, voice low. "We were wrong." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't enough. But it was a beginning. When the check came, I reached for it automatically. "Don't be ridiculous," Mom said quickly. "We invited you." I slid my black Amex across the table anyway. "I know," I said with a faint smile. "But I can afford it." For once, they didn't argue. And as the waiter walked away, I noticed something subtle. The way my father's shoulders eased, the way my mother finally looked at me without condescension. Maybe, just maybe, they were starting to see the woman who'd been there all along. When I finally stepped out of the Fairmont, the night air hit me like a soft release. Cool, clear, and startlingly quiet after hours of polite noise. The valet brought my car around, but I didn't get in right away. I stood there for a moment, watching my reflection ripple across the hood, gold lights glinting off my grandmother's bracelet. Inside, laughter still echoed faintly from the ballroom. But it wasn't my laughter, and it didn't sting anymore. I thought about that girl I used to be, the one who begged for approval, who measured her worth in her parents' smiles. She felt like a stranger now, though a part of her would always live somewhere deep in my chest. I owed her everything. Her pain built my foundation. Her tears watered my ambition. I didn't need an apology anymore. I had something better, peace. As I looked back through the glass doors, I caught a glimpse of my mother watching me from the foyer. Her face was softer than I remembered, less polished, more human. She didn't wave. Neither did I. But she smiled, just barely, and for once, it didn't feel forced. Maybe that was enough. I slid into my car, turned the key, and let the city blur past in streaks of light. My phone buzzed with a message from my cousin. "Thank you for what you said tonight. I needed that." I smiled, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. Grandma's words echoed faintly in my mind. Remember who you are. I touched the bracelet, feeling its familiar warmth against my skin. For years, I believed it was a reminder to prove myself, but now I understood. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about never forgetting my own worth, no matter who tried to measure it. At the next red light, I glanced at the Fairmont fading in the distance and whispered to myself, steady and sure, I don't need a seat at their table. The light turned green. I smiled, the kind of smile that feels like freedom, and drove off into the night. Because I built my own. Bottom of form.